March 6, 1945. 3:47 p.m. Cologne Cathedral Square. Feldwebel Karl Hoffmann's world narrowed to the diameter of his periscope lens. The unknown tank sat 200 meters away, partially concealed behind the shattered remains of a bakery. Its gun barrel, easily 5 meters long, swiveled with mechanical precision, tracking something Hoffmann couldn't see. The movement was smooth, deliberate, nothing like the jerky hydraulics of a Sherman. His hand hovered over the intercom switch, throat dry. 3 years of combat had trained him to identify threats instantly, to react without thought. But his brain refused to process what his eyes were seeing. Too long, too low, too wrong. Achtung, he finally managed, voice cracking. Unknown Panzer. Cathedral side. 200 meters. His gunner, Klaus, shifted at the traverse wheel. Is it captured? One of ours? Before Hoffmann could answer, the American tank fired. The sound arrived before the sight, a crack that split the afternoon air like lightning striking metal. Hoffmann's eyes snapped left, following the tracer's path across the square. Oberfeldwebel Bartelborth's Panther sat hull down behind rubble 120 meters from the American position. Good cover. Frontal armor angled. The crew had probably felt safe. The shell struck the Panther's turret ring at 853 meters per second. The impact was surgical. No ricochet. No spark skittering across the armor plate. The round punched through 100 millimeters of hardened steel as if it were tin, continuing through the crew compartment in a fraction of a heartbeat. The Panther didn't explode, not immediately. There was a moment, perhaps half a second, where nothing seemed to happen. Then the tank's sides bulged outward, pressure seeking escape. Smoke erupted from every hatch and vision port simultaneously. The turret lifted 3 inches off its ring before settling back at an angle, one side lower than the other. 5 men died before their brains could register the impact. Before we continue, click that subscribe button, like this video, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It brings me great joy knowing that these war stories and lessons get to people all over the world. Your support helps us bring more thrilling war stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now let's get back to the story. Hoffmann felt his hands begin to shake. In 3 years of fighting, he had seen Panthers knocked out by Soviet 85mm guns, by British 17-pounders, even by lucky shots from American tank destroyers. But never like this. Never with such clinical, instant devastation. Never from an American tank. "Laden! Laden!" his commander screamed. "Load! Load!" But Hoffmann's crew was already moving, survival instinct overriding shock. The breech clanged shut. Klaus rotated the turret, searching for the target. The American tank was already reversing into cover, disappearing behind the bakery wall as efficiently as it had appeared. Hoffmann keyed the radio, hands trembling against the transmitter. "All units, this is Tiger 231. Unknown American Panzer, long gun, Cathedral Square. Destroyed Bartelborth's Panther with 1 shot. Frontal penetration." Static. Then voices overlapping, urgent and confused. "Repeat? Did you say frontal? What designation? Is it a tank destroyer? Impossible. No American tank." Hoffmann released the switch, cutting off the disbelief. He knew what he had seen. The question burning in his mind wasn't what had just happened. It was how. How had American industry, which they'd been told could only mass-produce inferior tanks, built something that could kill a Panther at combat range with a single shot? How had German intelligence, which tracked every Allied production line, missed this entirely? And the question that made his stomach tighten: how many more were out there? This single moment, 18 seconds from identification to destruction, marked the end of German armored superiority. Not because the Pershing would flood European battlefields. Only 20 fought in the war. Not because it was mechanically superior in every way. Panthers were faster. Tigers had comparable armor. The Pershing's real weapon wasn't its 90mm gun. It was the psychological collapse it triggered in crews who had believed themselves invincible. August 1942 to February 1945. For 30 months, the Tiger prowled European battlefields as something between war machine and myth. 62 tons of Krupp steel wrapped around an 88mm gun that could punch through any Allied tank at ranges where return fire was suicide. Frontal armor 100mm thick, impervious to the American 75mm Sherman gun at virtually all combat distances. Side armor that shrugged off British 6-pounders like insults. A Maybach V12 engine that moved this fortress at speeds that defied its weight. The numbers told only part of the story. Tiger crews painted kill rings on their barrels, white circles that multiplied like trophies, each one representing a Sherman, Cromwell, or T-34 left burning. Ace commanders like Michael Whitmayan became legends, credited with destroying 138 tanks and 132 anti-tank guns before his death in Normandy. Otto Carius survived the entire war with over 150 confirmed kills. These weren't just statistics, they were the foundation of German armored supremacy. Allied tankers learned to fear the Tiger's silhouette. Training manuals emphasized one doctrine: avoid engagement, call in artillery, request air support, coordinate multiple Shermans for flanking attacks. Never, under any circumstances, face a Tiger frontally with a single tank. The phenomenon had a name: Tiger Fever. Allied crews who spotted the distinctive boxy hull and wide tracks would hesitate, retreat, or panic. Experienced commanders watched green crews freeze at their controls, paralyzed by the knowledge that their 75mm guns were essentially useless against frontal Tiger armor. Some units reported engagement ranges where Tigers destroyed Shermans at 2,000 meters, distances where American tankers couldn't even see their killers through their periscopes. The mathematics were brutal and undeniable. Combat studies estimated that destroying a single Tiger required 5 Sherman tanks, and 4 of those Shermans wouldn't survive the exchange. The U.S. Army accepted this as the cost of doing business, relying on overwhelming numbers and industrial capacity to compensate for technical inferiority. German tank crews knew it too. They fought with the confidence of men operating genuinely superior machinery. Crew selection was rigorous. Training was extensive. A Tiger commander understood his vehicle's capabilities down to the centimeter. Precisely how much armor separated him from death. Exactly what ranges his gun could penetrate Allied tanks. Which angles made him invincible. By early 1945, the Tiger had become more than a weapon. It was psychological warfare incarnated in steel. The mere report of Tigers in a sector could stall Allied advances, force wholesale tactical revisions, consume resources in elaborate countermeasures. This was the pedestal from which German armored doctrine operated. The unshakable belief that superior engineering, superior training, and superior machinery would triumph over American quantity. Then, on a cold afternoon in Cologne, that belief shattered in 18 seconds. The Americans had brought something new. Detroit Tank Arsenal, Warren, Michigan. September 1944. The assembly line at Chrysler's Tank Arsenal ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, producing Sherman tanks with the mechanical precision America had perfected. But in Building 7, behind chain-link fencing and armed guards, something different was taking shape. Workers called it the heavy section. Management called it classified. The blueprints designated it T-26E3. The first clue that something unusual was happening came from the gun tubes. Instead of the standard 75mm barrels that equipped thousands of Shermans, machinists were mounting massive 90mm anti-aircraft guns. Weapons designed to bring down high-altitude bombers, now being married to tank chassis through engineering adaptations that required entirely new turret rings, recoil systems, and hydraulic mechanisms. The work proceeded in secrecy that bordered on paranoia. Photographers were banned from Building 7. Workers signed non-disclosure agreements threatening court-martial for violations. Even the shipping manifests were deliberately vague. Heavy equipment destined for European theater, general deployment. The 90mm gun wasn't new. It had proven itself against German aircraft throughout 1943 and 1944, capable of destroying bombers at 30,000 feet. What was new was the realization that this same weapon, firing the same M82 armor-piercing ammunition, could penetrate German heavy armor at combat ranges. The mathematics were straightforward and devastating. The M82 round, traveling at 853 meters per second, could punch through 170 millimeters of armor plate at 1,000 meters. Tiger WWII frontal armor, 100 millimeters. Panther glacis, 80 millimeters angled. King Tiger, vulnerable at the turret face. For the first time, American tankers would have functional parity, or better, against Germany's heaviest armor. But guns meant nothing without platforms. The T-26 chassis borrowed from the Sherman but added 5 tons of additional armor. Frontal glacis thickness increased to 102 millimeters. Turret armor, 114 millimeters. The redesigned hull sat lower, presented a smaller target profile, and incorporated sloped armor principles the Americans had learned from studying knocked-out Panthers. The Pershing, as it would eventually be designated, wasn't just an upgunned Sherman. It was a fundamental rethinking of American tank doctrine. Production began in November 1944, 20 tanks. That was the initial order, enough to test the concept, insufficient to affect strategic planning. Each hull received priority materials allocation. Each crew was hand-selected from veteran tankers and sworn to operational security protocols that forbade discussing their vehicles' capabilities, even with other American units. The first Pershings left Detroit in January 1945, loaded onto transport ships bound for Antwerp. Their destination, the 3rd Armored Division, already engaged in the drive toward Germany's industrial heartland. The shipping manifests listed them as M36 medium tanks, a designation that wouldn't officially exist for another month. No press releases announced their deployment. No intelligence briefings warned German commanders. The Pershing would introduce itself the way all revolutionary weapons do, on the battlefield, without warning, in a moment of absolute tactical clarity. The only question was, which German crew would be first to discover what American industry had built in secret? March 6, 1945, 3:47 p.m., Cologne, Cathedral Square. The Panther fired first. Oberfeldwebel Bartelborth's crew had secured hull-down position behind rubble 120 meters from the cathedral. Frontal armor angled, gun trained on the intersection where American armor would have to expose itself. 3 years of combat experience told him this was a killing position, textbook defensive tactics that had destroyed dozens of Shermans. The American tank rolled into view with the deliberate confidence of a predator that knows its apex. Bartelborth's gunner didn't hesitate. The Panther's 75mm gun cracked, the round streaking across Cathedral Square at 935 meters per second. Impact. Direct hit on the American tank's frontal glacis. The shell ricocheted. A sound like a bell being struck with a sledgehammer rang across the square. The armor-piercing round deflected upward at a 40-degree angle, tumbling through the air before embedding itself harmlessly in the cathedral's stone facade. Bartelborth felt ice flood his stomach. Impossible! No Sherman armor could deflect a Panther gun at this range. The American turret rotated with hydraulic smoothness, the massive gun tube, far longer than any 75mm barrel, tracking with mechanical precision. 1 second, 2 seconds. The Pershing fired. The 90mm gun's report was different from anything Bartelborth had heard. Deeper, heavier. The crack of a weapon that moved physics differently. The muzzle brake channeled the blast in twin horizontal cones that kicked up dust from the cathedral square like invisible hands. The M82 armor-piercing round struck the Panther's turret ring at 853 meters per second. No ricochet, no spark dancing across steel. The tungsten cord penetrator punched through 100 millimeters of hardened Krupp armor as if it were cardboard, continuing through the crew compartment in a microsecond of catastrophic energy transfer. Bartelborth never knew what killed him. The round vaporized the internal fittings, the superheated metal igniting ammunition, hydraulic fluid, and flesh simultaneously. The Panther's sides bulged outward from internal pressure before smoke erupted from every hatch. The turret lifted 3 inches off its ring, then settled crooked, one side lower than the other. 5 men ceased to exist in the time it takes to blink. Across the square, Sergeant Bob Early, gunner in Pershing No. 26, didn't celebrate. His voice came through the intercom flat and professional. Target destroyed. Traversing right. Behind him, cameraman Jim Bates kept filming, his 16mm camera capturing the moment German armored superiority died. The footage would show smoke still rising from the Panther's hull as the Pershing reversed into cover with the same unhurried confidence it had shown advancing. In Tiger 231, Feldwebel Hoffmann keyed his radio with shaking hands. All units, unknown American Panzer, long gun, Cathedral Square. Destroyed Bartelborth's Panther. Frontal penetration. The radio net erupted. Repeat designation? Frontal? Impossible! Is it a tank destroyer? No American tank can, but Hoffmann had already released the transmit switch. He knew what he'd seen. The question burning through every German crew within radio range wasn't what had happened. It was how many more were out there. Western Germany, March 1945. The reports started arriving within hours of Cologne. American Panzer, unknown designation, long gun barrel, frontal armor impervious to 75mm. By nightfall, German intelligence sections across the front were receiving variants of the same impossible description. A tank that looked almost like a Sherman. Same general profile, same tracks, but lower, heavier. Mounting a gun that shouldn't exist on a medium tank chassis. Wehrmacht designation officers couldn't classify it. Was it a tank destroyer? A modified Sherman? A captured German vehicle? The gun alone defied categorization. Too large for the 76mm Shermans they knew. Too integrated to be a field modification. The confusion metastasized into something worse. Phantom sightings. By March 10th, German crews were reporting Pershing encounters at a rate that exceeded the actual number deployed. 20 tanks became 50 in combat reports. Regular Shermans, the 76mm variants with slightly longer barrels, were being misidentified as the mystery tank. Crews who had fought confidently for months suddenly hesitated at every engagement, trying to identify whether they faced a normal Sherman or the new killer. The hesitation was fatal. In the seconds German commanders spent trying to identify targets, American tank crews, who had no such doubts, were firing first. Panzer IV Commander Wilhelm Ritter recorded in his diary, "Saw 3 American tanks at 800 meters. Couldn't tell if they were the new type. Ordered withdrawal rather than risk engagement. Later learned they were standard Shermans. I don't care. Better alive and cautious than dead and correct." The psychological fracture spread like a virus through German armored units. Tanks were being abandoned for mechanical issues that would have been field repaired weeks earlier. Crews who encountered any American armor at long range were calling for support rather than engaging. Company commanders reported NCOs questioning orders to advance toward American positions. Tiger Ace Otto Carius, whose kill count exceeded 150, noted the shift with clinical precision. The Americans have done something unprecedented. They've made our crews doubt their vehicles. Not the equipment, the crews themselves. A tiger is still a tiger, but the man inside now wonders, is that a normal Sherman or the one that kills tigers? In that moment of doubt, we've already lost. Intelligence officers struggled to provide clarity. Interrogation of American prisoners yielded nothing. Most tankers didn't know the Pershing existed. Captured Sherman crews couldn't explain the mystery tank because they'd never seen one. Aerial reconnaissance showed American tank columns but couldn't distinguish Pershings from Shermans at altitude. By mid-March, forward units were operating under an assumption that poisoned tactical planning. Assume every American tank can kill you frontally until proven otherwise. The order from 6th Panzer Army Headquarters read, "Exercise extreme caution when engaging American armor." New heavy tank reported. Designation unknown. Capabilities: frontal armor 100 mm plus, gun penetration comparable to 88 mm. Engage only with numerical superiority or prepared positions. It was an admission no German armored commander wanted to make. For the first time since 1942, they were the ones who needed to be afraid. March 1945, the arithmetic of collapse. The Pershing's real weapon wasn't its 90 mm gun. It was the industrial system that could have produced thousands of them, if the war had lasted another year. By March 1945, American tank production had achieved numbers that German planners considered physically impossible. The United States produced 49,234 Sherman tanks between 1942 and 1945, an average of 1,127 per month for 44 months. At peak production in 1943, American assembly lines delivered 17 tanks per day. Every single day. Chrysler's Detroit tank arsenal alone employed 10,000 workers across 3 shifts. When demand exceeded capacity, the U.S. military contracted 11 additional manufacturers: Fisher Body, Ford, Pacific Car and Foundry, American Locomotive. Each facility received standardized blueprints, interchangeable parts specifications, and production quotas that treated tanks like automobiles, because, to American industry, they essentially were. Germany never approached these numbers. Total Tiger I production: 1,347 tanks across 3 years. Tiger II, 492. Panther, 6,000. The entire German tank production for 1944, including all models, all variants, totaled 19,002 vehicles. Less than half of what America produced in Shermans alone. The disparity wasn't incompetence, it was philosophy. German tanks were masterpieces of engineering, individually superior, mechanically complex, requiring specialized parts, skilled labor, and manufacturing precision that took time. A single Tiger required 300,000 man-hours to produce. The Maybach engine alone needed hand-fitting of components. The overlapping road wheels, providing excellent weight distribution and ride quality, required individual manufacturing, and couldn't be quickly replaced in the field. American tanks were products of industrial standardization. A Sherman required 10,000 man-hours to produce, 30 times faster than a Tiger. The radial aircraft engine was mass-produced, interchangeable, and could be swapped in the field by moderately trained mechanics. Every bolt, every plate, every component was designed for replacement, not perfection. The Pershing embodied this philosophy perfected. Its 90mm gun was adapted from existing anti-aircraft weapons, proven, reliable, already in mass production. The chassis borrowed heavily from Sherman components. The engine was a Ford GF, essentially 2 truck engines joined together, built in facilities already producing thousands of similar units monthly. If the war had continued into 1946, American plans projected 1,000 Pershings per month. By comparison, Germany's total tank production in January 1945 had fallen to 385 vehicles, across all types, all fronts. But the production gap told only part of the story. Germany's industrial base was collapsing. Allied bombing had destroyed manufacturing centers. Fuel shortages meant tanks sat immobile. Training facilities lacked gasoline to prepare crews. The Tigers and Panthers, still rolling off assembly lines in March 1945, often traveled to the front by rail, preserving precious fuel only to be abandoned days later when supply lines failed. The Pershing arrived at the moment when German armored warfare was dying not from inferior engineering, but from industrial starvation. 20 Pershings fought in World War II, but those 20 represented something Germany could no longer match: the capacity to produce more. The knowledge that if these 20 failed, 40 would follow, then 80, then hundreds. Germany's tank aces faced not just better guns, but infinite American industry. April 1945, inside a captured Pershing. SS Obersturmführer Heinrich Koch stood in the turret basket of the American tank for 3 full minutes without speaking. His crew waited below, veteran tankers who had survived 3 years in Panthers and Tigers, men who understood armor doctrine down to the molecular level. They had expected to find crude welding, inefficient layouts, the hallmarks of American mass production they'd been taught to dismiss. Instead, Koch's hands moved across surfaces that shouldn't exist. The turret basket rotated on a power traverse system, smoother than anything in German tanks. Toggle switches, clearly labeled in English, controlled systems with mechanical precision. The commander's position featured a rotating cupola with 6 vision blocks, providing 360-degree visibility without exposing himself. The gunner's periscope included a rangefinder integrated into the sight picture. But it was the small things that broke him. Interior lighting, actual electric lights that illuminated the crew compartment, eliminating the semi-darkness German crews fought in. Padded seats with adjustable height, a turret floor that rotated with the gun so the loader didn't have to reposition his feet with every traverse, shell storage positioned at ergonomic heights, no bending, no straining, just smooth mechanical motion from rack to breech. Koch's voice, when he finally spoke, was hollow. They designed this for men who they expected to survive. His loader, Klaus, ran his hand along the ammunition storage. "Sir, look at this." Koch gestured at the interior. "Everything is positioned for crew efficiency, for comfort, for long-term use." He paused, something cracking in his voice. They built this expecting their crews to live long enough that comfort would matter. The realization settled over the crew like physical weight. German doctrine had always emphasized aggression, breakthrough, decisive action. Tank interiors reflected this. Spartan, efficient, designed for crews who would either win quickly or die trying. The Tiger's fighting compartment was cramped, dark, requiring crews to contort themselves around machinery. The Panther's engine compartment caught fire so frequently that crews joked about brewing up as an inevitable outcome. The Americans had built a tank assuming their crews deserved to live. Koch's gunner, Werner, discovered the gun stabilization system, a gyroscopic mechanism that kept the main gun roughly on target even while moving. "Mein Gott," he whispered, "they can fire accurately while driving." German tanks required full stops for accurate gunnery. The Americans had solved a problem German engineers considered unsolvable, then installed the solution as standard equipment. Later in the POW compound, Koch would tell American interrogators something that appeared in classified reports but was never made public. "We were told American tanks were inferior because Americans were inferior, weak, undisciplined, dependent on material rather than spirit. Then we captured a Pershing." He paused, choosing words carefully. Your engineers designed that tank with care, for the men inside. Our tanks were built to win battle. Yours were built to bring men home. His voice dropped to barely audible. That was the moment I knew we had lost. Not the battle, the war, the ideology, everything. You valued your soldiers more than we valued ours. April 15th and May 7th, 1945, the final collapse. The 2nd SS Panzer Division received orders to counterattack American positions near the Elbe River. On April 20th, of the 43 tanks listed as operational on paper, 17 never moved. Not because they were mechanically disabled, because their crews refused to start the engines. Company Commander Hans von Luck recorded the moment with clinical detachment. I ordered advance. The men sat in their tanks and did not move. When I demanded explanation, Oberfeldwebel Steiner, veteran of Kursk, a man I had decorated personally, looked at me and said, "Sir, we don't know what we're facing anymore." I had no answer for him, because neither did I. The hunters had become the hunted. Tank ace Michael Wittmann, 138 confirmed kills, died in August 1944, before the Pershing arrived. But his surviving contemporaries made different calculations in the war's final weeks. Otto Carius, Kurt Knispel's crew, even fanatical SS tankers began surrendering to American forces rather than risk combat against an enemy whose capabilities they could no longer predict. The psychology was surgical in its devastation. For 3 years, German tankers had operated from a position of technical superiority. They knew with mathematical certainty that their armor was thicker, their guns more powerful, their tactical doctrine superior. This knowledge was psychological armor as real as the steel that surrounded them. The Pershing shattered that certainty. It didn't matter that only 20 Pershings fought in the European theater. What mattered was that German crews could no longer identify threats with confidence. Every American tank formation might include the long gun variant. Every engagement might be the one where frontal armor proved inadequate. Every hesitation might be the difference between life and death. So German tankers stopped engaging. Field Marshal Walter Model's 11th Panzer Division reported on April 23 that operational readiness had fallen to 18%, not from mechanical failure, but from crews claiming minor issues to avoid deployment. Fuel pump problems that could be fixed in 30 minutes became justifications for declaring tanks non-operational. Loose track links, normally repaired in the field, required depot-level maintenance. The excuses were transparent. No one cared. SS Brigadeführer Wilhelm Bittrich, commanding 2 SS Panzer Corps, issued an order on April 28 that acknowledged the unraveling. Armor units will engage American forces only when holding prepared defensive positions with clear fields of fire exceeding 1,000 meters. Close-range engagement is prohibited without explicit Corps-level authorization. It was an admission of checkmate. The Panzer Force, once the spearhead of Blitzkrieg, the terror of Allied armies, had been reduced to defensive warfare governed by fear. On May 2nd, the 12th SS Panzer Division encountered American armor near Eger. 3 Tigers, 2 Panthers, hull-down positions, numerical advantage. The American formation included 2 Pershings. The German commander ordered withdrawal without firing a shot. In his after-action report, one of the last filed before the surrender, he wrote simply, "Unable to confirm target types at range. Elected to preserve force integrity." Translated from military euphemism, it meant, "We were afraid, and fear is harder to fight than tanks." The German armored force didn't die from casualties. It died from doubt. Deutsches Panzermuseum, Munster, Germany. Present day. They sit 15 meters apart under museum lighting. A Tiger Y and a Pershing, frozen in eternal confrontation. Tour groups photograph both, but the older visitors, the ones who remember grandfather's stories, tend to linger at the Pershing. Something about the long gun barrel commands attention in ways the Tiger's bulk cannot. The plaques tell the basic facts. Tiger WWII, 1,347 produced. Pershing, 2,212 produced, though only 20 saw combat in World War II. The numbers suggest near equivalence, a technological race that ended in stalemate. The numbers lie. In 1979, the U.S. Army's Armor School at Fort Knox conducted interviews with surviving German tank veterans for a tactical study. The transcripts, declassified in 1995, reveal what official histories obscured. Former SS Hauptsturmführer Ernst Barkmann, credited with destroying over 40 Allied tanks. The Pershing didn't defeat us because it was superior, though it was. It defeated us because it proved American industry could produce quality, not just quantity. We had believed this was impossible. We were wrong about everything. Otto Carius, interviewed in 1990 at his pharmacy in Hirschweiler-Pettersheim, also was more direct. The Tiger was the better tank, mechanically, probably even at war's end. But the Pershing was the better weapon, because America could build more, because American crews survived to gain experience, because your soldiers went home. He paused, arranging pill bottles with the same precision he'd once used to aim an 88mm gun. We built masterpieces. You built tools. Tools won. The Pershing's legacy wasn't its kill-to-loss ratio or armor penetration tables. It was the psychological fracture it created in an enemy that had defined itself through technological superiority. Germany's armored doctrine was built on the idea that superior engineering, the product of Teutonic discipline and technical genius, would overcome material disadvantage. The Pershing proved that industrial democracy, with its standardized parts and production line efficiency, could produce weapons equal or superior to handcrafted German masterpieces, and produce them in numbers that made individual quality irrelevant. 20 Pershings shaped the decisions of thousands of German tankers in the war's final weeks. Not through direct combat, most German crews never saw one, but through the collapse of certainty. The knowledge that American industry had closed the quality gap meant every tactical calculation required recalibration. Every engagement carried new risk. Every day, the odds shifted further against survival. The Tiger WWII in Munster weighs 54 tons and took 300,000 man-hours to build. The Pershing beside it weighs 46 tons and took 12,000 man-hours to produce. Both could kill each other at combat ranges. But only one represented a system that could replace its losses faster than combat could create them. In the end, the war wasn't won by the best tank. It was won by the best system for building tanks, and the philosophy that valued bringing crews home more than achieving engineering perfection. The long gun didn't just penetrate armor. It penetrated the myth that had sustained German armored warfare since 1939. Some myths die in explosions. This one died in silence. In the moment, German crews realized courage couldn't overcome mathematics, and spirit couldn't defeat industry.